I think we can give our appreciation once again to Stolen Thunder. Marie. Marie just turned 52 years old, got divorced, and set up her first dating profile on Match.com. Getting back into the dating scene after 25 years just feels strange, she told me. I've met a couple of people already, but they have had so much emotional baggage. She paused and then laughed honestly. Emotional baggage. But you know, don't we all? Author Jamie Hughes writes, "The longer a life, the challenge is not the distance between destinations, but the difficulty of traveling light. My soul's a suitcase packed full, one half filled with what was, the other with what should be." Rosalind Johnson picks up on that sentiment, saying, "There's a luggage limit to every passenger on an airplane flight. The same rules apply to your life. You must eliminate some baggage before you can fly." But you know, I think that there are two kinds of emotional baggage. There's the heavy kind that weighs down our spirit, leads us to make unskillful choices, causes us to overreact, drives us to become guarded, or in some way tugs us far from our best selves. That is the emotional baggage of hurts, wounds, failures, disappointment, and the inevitable losses that accompany a life. But you know, there is a second kind of emotional baggage. This emotional baggage is the source of lightness of being. It reminds us of hope and happiness. It nourishes us with the warmth of memory, opens our bruised heart, and whispers truths that we've long forgotten. This baggage invites us to remember when our lives were infused with moments of kindness, connection, wonder, synchronicity, grace, peace, and pleasure. It helps recall us to our best selves again. This knapsack represents for me that second kind of emotional baggage. This knapsack is old. I think I bought it in 1987. Some of you weren't even born yet. Its back straps, I'll show you, are frayed, ripped, worn, and threadbare. It's the kind of knapsack that I'm kind of embarrassed to carry onto the plane because people just kind of look at you. But this piece of carry-on baggage has been through so much of my life with me. From that day, some 35 years ago, when I carried it out of the EMS store, Eastern Mountain Sports Store, this has been my good baggage. Oh, the places this bag has gone. So many years ago, this bag was carried backstage at theaters, cabarets, and concert halls in Boston, Massachusetts, where I worked as a producer and a director and as an agent for some extraordinary singers. A lifetime ago, this bag carried countless CDs. Who remembers CDs? Remember when we used to say that about records? Now CDs. A lifetime ago, this bag was full of CDs, and it carried them into Boston radio stations, where I hosted a popular radio program featuring Broadway music and interviews with the great stage stars that were coming through town. This bag still glows from the sheer joy that I experienced in those radio days. For almost 3 decades, this bag rode back and forth on buses between Boston and New York City more times than I could ever count. It holds the echoes of some of the best and worst Broadway plays and musicals produced in the last 35 years, including the original cast of Rent and the Broadway debut of young Daniel Radcliffe, otherwise known as Harry Potter. This bag even sat under the seat in front of famed composer Stephen Sondheim at an off-Broadway production of one of his musicals. I was sitting right in front of him. I like to believe Stephen Sondheim's feet actually touched that bag. Long ago, this bag, it carried the hopes and dreams of 2 love-struck young men as Jim and I headed off for our first vacation together as a couple. That was back when I had a lot of hair. 26 years after that vacation, that bag was with me in a Boston courtroom as the judge granted our divorce, and 2 lives that I thought would always be together went their separate ways. This bag was with me as I learned to walk solo into the new blessings I would discover in life's next chapter. For 8 years, that bag carried my lunch to Harvard Business School, where I worked in the Office of the Alumni Career Services, assisting alums as they navigated the challenges of career change, some forced, some self-selected. It was there I learned to listen to people's stories, to really listen when people shared from their heart. I learned there to ask gentle questions that allowed them to discover their own answers and next steps, a precursor to what would ultimately become my own call to ministry. In September of 1992, the year Bill Clinton first ran for president, this bag traveled with me in my rusty Chevy Citation as I drove from Boston to Santa Fe, New Mexico, called out into the starkness of that desert by something I could not name but could only feel and respond to. There, in that New Mexico enchanted land of mesas and endless sky, I met a yoga master who would teach me an ancient spiritual practice and forever change the direction of my life. Traveling back to Boston, this bag I carried up the steps of Arlington Street Church for the first time. It was there at Arlington Street Church that I discovered Unitarian Universalism, this faith of radical welcome, this faith that allowed a 28-year-old gay man to sit in the pews and invited him to be fully who he was in every sense of the word. It was there that I learned that our Unitarian Universalist religion is for joy and for love, for comfort and challenge, for justice and beloved community. It was there that I felt the call to become a Unitarian Universalist minister. Filled with notebooks and research papers, this bag then spent 5 years traveling back and forth from my apartment to Harvard Divinity School as I studied for my Master of Divinity degree. It spent a summer in the burn unit at Massachusetts General Hospital, where I trained as a student chaplain and learned lots about death and even more about life. Filled with anticipation, this bag headed down south to the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia, to the Unitarian Universalist Community Church of Glen Allen, a new congregation who called me to be their first official minister. This bag carried my first sermons written as a newly ordained minister. Oh, bag, I apologize that you had to carry those early sermons. It was present as church members marched through the streets of Richmond demanding living wage for city workers, and was swept into City Hall, where long before marriage equality was the law of the land, we rallied for the right to have marriage licenses issued to all who wished to wed, the first time that happened in Virginia's capital city. After a few years, that bag then headed back up north to a suburb of Boston, where I was called to be the 36th minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Reading, Massachusetts. I was charged with overseeing a multi-million-dollar expansion of the church campus while welcoming so many young families into the loving embrace of Unitarian Universalism that we soon added a second service. It was a time of abundant growth as well as many farewells as beloved elders passed into the mysteries of death. Nico, as I make my way back, I'm going to go to the pulpit mic because I'm getting crackling on the portable. This bag and I have journeyed far together. It was with me on 2 witness trips to Israeli-occupied Palestine. It soaked up the anguish in Palestinian refugee camps. It rubbed against the massive cement apartheid walls that keep Palestinians separated from their homes and farmlands. It reeked of human-manufactured madness as I was tear-gassed by the Israeli Defense Forces at a nonviolent protest in the Palestinian village of Begin. I also carried this bag into Auschwitz in Poland with my father, where we stood speechless at that place of incomprehensible inhumanity. We mourned how cycles of cruelty are so easily passed forward. 10 years ago, terrified, truly terrified, I carried this bag into Kabul, Afghanistan, to meet people who were working to rebuild a free society after the fall of the Taliban. This bag is infused with their courage. This bag bumped along with me in the back of a truck as I track lions with wildlife preservationists at the Saladi Game Preserve in South Africa. It went into the rainforests of Uganda in search of endangered African mountain gorillas and bore witness at Rwanda's heartbreaking Museum of Genocide. Iraqi security forces opened this bag and searched it for explosives before allowing me to enter and worship at some of the holiest shrines in the Islamic world, in the sacred city of Karbala, Iraq. That Islamic spiritual energy for forever vibrates within this bag. A year later, in Iran, this bag was carried through the stunning gardens of Isfahan, considered some of the most beautiful in the world. Since then, it's been to China and multiple countries in Central Asia as I explored the route of the ancient Silk Road. 1,892 years of Silk Road travel and trade are within the fibers of this bag. This bag made many trips to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. First, and I think we should have a side that says Pittsburgh. Do we know? Yes, there we go. First, for joyful holiday visits back home to Mom and Dad. Then, as my mom was dying, it made bi-weekly trips there, Thursday through Saturday. This bag carrying the computer with which I would write my Sunday sermons in airports, on the plane, and at her deathbed. It made the trip again to Pittsburgh as I moved my dad into senior living. And then ultimately, more of those Thursday through Saturday visits as he grew ill, struggled, and finally faded into the mysteries of death. This bag sat near the front door as I empty my dad's apartment, clearing it out for the next elder who would, for a time, call that place home. Into it, I tucked black and white photos from Dad's childhood, his Army dog tags, a paperweight from his first factory that he managed, mementos from cruises he and Mom enjoyed, and the prayer I offered at their 50th wedding anniversary celebration. All reminders of a long life well lived. Over the last 8 years, this bag has made many trips to Seattle, where my sister and her family live, where we make new family memories. This bag was with me 7 years ago, as for the first time, I walked past those plastic sequoia tree trunks at the Fresno International Airport. What were they thinking? There, in the shadow of the giant plastic sequoias, I was greeted by the ministerial search team from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Fresno. It was with me during a whirlwind week of potlucks and Q&A sessions prior to the vote to call me as the next minister, lucky enough to serve this congregation. Who here was there for that vote? It'd be interesting. Wow, there's a lot who were not. So many newer folks to the congregation. That's exciting. This bag was here for my first summer in Fresno. Oh my God, what was I thinking? That was a summer, ash kept falling from the sky during raging wildfires, coating my car. That first summer, I would just stare at the bag, wondering if it was actually gonna melt when the temperature topped 115 degrees. I had never experienced 115 degrees in my life. This bag is now infused with the best of California's Central Valley. Farm stand Armenian cucumbers. Let's hear it for Armenian cucumbers. World famous peaches and our city's greatest treasure, freshly picked Fresno State corn. Let's hear it for Fresno State corn. This bag has felt the spray from Yosemite's roaring springtime waterfalls and absorbed the scent of wildflowers growing above Pine Flat Dam. This bag felt outrage at Black Lives Matter vigils, and heard pleas at City Hall for a proactive, protective rental inspection program. This bag was in Washington, D.C. at the kickoff of the Poor People's Campaign in May of 2019. It was even arrested with me for nonviolent protest at the Capitol. And this bag watched the pride flag fly for the first time at Fresno City Hall. And then something that I never expected this bag would do. In March of 2020, this bag carried our congregation's candle of community from this sanctuary out through those doors and into my home when the pandemic locked us down. Last June, this bag carried our candle of community, now accompanied by our candle of COVID deaths, back into the sanctuary when we reopened our Alluvial Avenue campus alongside our virtual campus, becoming one congregation in many places. So, why have I shared with you so much of my own personal journey? I promise you it's not self-indulgence. Why does my own good baggage matter to you? Because it's a reminder that you have good baggage too. We tend to focus on negative baggage. We all have that. But there is something more beyond that. There is good baggage that holds the positive and transforming memories of the journeys of our lives. We all have good baggage, baggage that reminds us where we've been and how we've gotten to be who we are in this moment. We need good baggage to remind us of the journey through the years, the faces, places, stories, the fullness of who we have become, the fullness of who we will continue to become. Elizabeth Fowl writes, "On long journeys, I find the tools and maps I need are tucked away beneath the surface of things in the secret pockets of my own heart. I can measure my steps from here to there in months and years and countless joys, countless pains. A landscape that echoes the altitude of grief, the latitude of learning, the longitude of love. I have found my footsteps from years before, where I placed my feet in climbing rocks or stood barefoot in sand. In my knapsack of suede and blue, where I collect such souvenirs as shells, stones, and feathers, you carry something beyond the physical evidence of travel, harboring the echo of voice and image of heart that taught me, that taught you to celebrate and grieve, and allowed us to see how hearts could merge and remain a witness to the map of love. My spiritual friends, may we remain witnesses to our maps of love. I wish you, my fellow travelers, I wish you good baggage. May we treasure the memories, the experiences, the learning, the growing, the loss, the joy, the sorrow, and celebration. Que así sea, bendito sea. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.